Indian, Indigenous, Native American, First Nations. None of these words are of our traditional languages. None of these words represent who we are more than the traditional names of our individual homelands. Our homelands, which are named often by description and often with a beautiful story which carries a power greater than any one word forced on us by colonial interpretation. We all have questions. Sometimes answers are not available, and that has to be okay.
...2004 startete das erste Filmfestival in Zürich und hier in Stuttgart.
Also eine Idee kam sozusagen zur anderen und dann habe ich gesagt, lass mal schauen, ich arbeite ja mit vielen Kultureinrichtungen hier in der Stadt zusammen. Wir gucken mal, ob da was machbar ist. Und dann bin ich eben gelaufen zum kommunalen Kino, zum Deutsch-Amerikanischen Zentrum, zum Kulturamt, weil klar war, also wir brauchen auf jeden Fall Unterstützung. Und da habe ich überall offene Türen eingerannt. Wir waren halt Ehrenamt, das war sozusagen die Begeisterung, kostet am Ende dann kein Geld.
Das Ehrenamt ist bis heute geblieben. Richtig. 2004. Wir sind ganz stolz und finden das auch ganz klasse, dass wir so viele interessierte und motivierte Menschen gefunden haben, angefangen von Studierenden über Leute, die hier bis ganz normal arbeiten und Kontakte haben und uns weitergeholfen haben und uns auch bis heute unterstützen. Und das finde ich ganz klasse. Ne?
Viele der Gäste kennen sich persönlich ja nicht unbedingt. Also manche sagen, ach, von dir habe ich schon mal gehört, Mensch, toll, dass wir uns jetzt hier treffen. Und dann ist es, also außer der Begegnung hier während des Festivals, ist es im Grunde so ein Socializing unter denen, dass sie sich da auch austauschen. Und das ist, finde ich, also auch ganz wertvoll.
When I create work, I'm just thinking about who will engage. And what's really beautiful as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, is when you reach a wider audience and they connect with your story and their perspective of who we are as Indigenous people changes. I feel like film or story carries agency. Story has the ability and capacity to kind of change perspective.
One of the things that I emphasize at the Institute of American and Indian Arts in the courses we teach is that it's not just about teaching filmmaking technique. I mean, of course, that's important. It's important to learn how to use a camera, how to use a microphone, but it's also important to learn how to tell a meaningful story. Young filmmakers like Rayne on the basics of, or the fundamentals of meaningful storytelling so that they can have the opportunity to tell stories that are universal in nature and that can make a connection with an audience.
Then again, I wasn't making art to sell either. Like, I was making art for the love of art. It made me happy to be alive, to make art without limitations.
It was hard to get opportunities in mainstream work to play someone who's not Indigenous. It's interesting that the term mainstream means non-Indigenous because it's from a much broader lens and it's from outsiders' perspectives. So now Indigenous filmmakers are finally getting the chance to create their own stories where they are the writer, the director, the producer, at least one of the above, maybe all three. We still have an issue where the amount of funding that we're given for these kind of movies and productions is much smaller than a mainstream production. And slowly, maybe that's going to start to change because we'll have the chance to prove ourselves with these other films so that we can have a chance to be a part of the mainstream as well. It's always a bit of a difficult, line to stay on either side of, because on one hand, I want to act. I want to be in productions. I want people to see my work. And I want to be seen as a normal human, like a person and alive today in today's society. But I'm also very, centered in Indigenous storytelling. And I think that it means a lot for us to have representation on screen that comes from our voice.
I think if I'm being true to myself as a storyteller and I'm speaking to what I know, then it reaches a universal or a global audience and they get it, then I've done my job. Because I don't like the word discover, new, fourth wave. I just feel like that is white-centric or Eurocentric. I feel like we've been doing this for a long time as Indigenous people. We've been in front of the camera for a very long time. We've been like in the colonial lens. So our stories, we've been always telling these kinds of stories. Now we're in key creative roles, which means that we're behind the camera as directors and writers. So we're sharing stories that actually mean something to us.
And I feel like too often our stories including Indigenous people are very sad and dark. And that's not really how Indigenous people act. Even when they're in a tough position, there's a levity, there's jokes, there's comedy to help heal their position or accept their position if they can't change it. And I think that now, we're getting a more authentic voice.
I didn't want to make Indians funny to white people. I wanted to make funny Indians for Indians.
I even painted my face.
For me, a long conversation was the separation between art and Indian art. So before I came to school, I was just making art without representation because I believed in pure creativity and I believe in a pure comedy or a universal sort of this communication.
Music can be an incredibly powerful medium, as a teacher. And I always say that music is the universal language, right? So no matter who you are, where you come from, what language you speak, if we can all understand music.
Culture is a living and breathing entity. Art, culture, design, and language is always changing. Every color, every bead, every stitch has a meaning and told a story. When you look at the different cultures across Canada and the United States, the majority, I don't want to say all, but the majority historically, we were wearing our art. Our art wasn't something separate. It wasn't something we put aside and we're going to do art today. It was something that was integral to our everyday life. It was a way of honoring the spirits, honoring animal spirits. I mean, there's many different concepts and reasons and meaning behind different designs across Native North America, but it really was integral to everyday life. It was never an original attempt, or it wasn't a conscious effort I was putting in terms of activism through fashion. That's what artists do. Artists raise awareness to issues, and fashion does the same thing. As one of my really good friends said, just being Native is political. So by nature, being involved with contemporary Indigenous arts and fashion, it becomes political. There's a broader awareness in terms of Native North American culture and also demonstrating the diversity, so we're not all one pan-Indian group, and to start conversations that will keep going. That this is just a start. So, I mean, and that's a lot. So it's kind of little baby steps, but I think the main thing first, what I hope visitors take away from the festival, is just being exposed to different arts and different Native people that they had no idea even existed.
For me, it's really interesting to witness the, the indigenous cinema genre becoming a reality, because it never was before. And now I feel like, we finally have something to identify with, and that makes me very hopeful.
So something that's been talked about, since even before we got here, was that, Germans have this kind of skewed view of what American First Nations people, who they are, So I really hope that they walk away from, our performances, as well as the other artists here, and after watching all these films, with, this kind of renewed, vision, of who First Nations people in North America are today.
The more work we do with the younger generation, the more barriers we break down, because it's young people that I think are bringing those critical, thoughts and ideas to the forefront. So when we talk about indigeneity, it's not past and present. Past and future or whatever. We're here with you now, right? And we're engaging with these tools, and we're using them to change perspective and do the work that matters to us.
I guess it contributes a conversation. It helps build a bridge towards conversation, and I couldn't ask for anything more than that.
Because we are the experts in our own lives. Okay, it's really challenging to have other people speak for us. We have a voice, we've always had a voice. It's really important to understand the value in listening, because we have been speaking for a very, very, very long time. So now the onus is on you to hear us.
Eskumadamu sevenegege